Welcome to a new episode of Let's Draw Pokemon. Today we're going to be drawing the third and final stage of Bulbasaur's evolutionary line, which is Venusaur. Venusaur is a pretty big, tough-looking monster. As we saw from Bulbasaur to Ivysaur, his bulb has finally blossomed into this gigantic flower with a strange little palm tree trunk with leaves gutting out and everything. While you're drawing your Venusaur, you just want to focus on, again, shapes. With a creature like Venusaur, the shapes are starting to get a little more complex. You do have the fairly simple form still. You're still drawing your circles and your cylinders, making pretty big chunky bowling pins for his legs and stuff like that. But then you're starting to add in intricate details to them, like the claws. He has little bumps and, I guess, scaly-like things on his body. Nothing too overly complex, but it adds a little bit of definition to his figure, and it's pretty interesting looking. And then you have stuff like his trunk that looks jagged. And of course his leaves are nice and crisp and have all kinds of different triangles forming and rectangles. Just look for the biggest shape, sketch it out, and then start going into your details. And you'll end up with a nice finished product. And don't be afraid to tweak things if something's not looking quite right proportionally, or if the sizing doesn't look 100%. You're at a rough stage, now's the time to just play around with it, change it, figure out what you like, and then just add in your little details like the spots and the scaly things, all that fun stuff. And so now we're going into inking because we have the base form done. Again, you want to try keeping the lines crisp and clean and pretty defined. Especially whenever you get to stuff like the leaves. You'll want to be erasing those edges and making them look kind of sharp so it's not too rounded or anything like that. There's a lot of intricate detail on Venusaur in comparison to Bulbasaur or Ivysaur. So just expect this one to take a bit more time to draw out, and feel free to take as much time as you need to get the details right. As they say, the devil's in the details. So you want to get the details fairly correct and pristine looking before you start coloring. Okay, so like with the others, I have a pre-made palette just to do this quickly. I'm just filling everything in. And we're good to go and start shading this guy. Another thing about Venusaur is that he has in his official artwork and stuff like that, he has a basic but complex color scheme. And what I mean by that is that his base colors are fairly simple. It's all fairly similar to Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, but there's a certain complexity that's been added with like shadows, because now he has different forms on him. Like he has this giant flower on top, so now we have to put, encase the leaves below him in shadow, and those leaves below actually cast shadows on his body and stuff like that, which you have to account for whenever you're rendering out your image and starting to add in your shadows and your highlights. You have to take that into consideration. And like always, we're trying to render everything out on like an equal level, not over rendering any one area, not picking one spot and being like, yeah, we have to do all the shadows and highlights right here. We're trying to spread the love around and make sure that we do it all equally. Whenever you're shading, it's a good idea to draw in accordance to the form, if you can. So if you have a cylinder, instead of focusing on like just doing an up and down on it, you're actually curving around. And by curving around, you're forming this 3D shape. Now, what do I mean by a 3D shape? Well, let's say you have a square. If all of a sudden that square has 5 other sides besides the one you're looking at, you have a box. And a box, you can consider it as a 3D shape. So they have the light falling on it reacts differently on different sides depending on the amount of light it takes in on each side. It casts shadows. Shadows are created on it from the lack of light. All sorts of complexity starts coming into effect. And the same thing happens with creatures like Venusaur. So he has some shadows that form on those little bumps and scale-like things that he has on his legs, because they're blocking out the light from underneath them. It's being cast down upon them. So darker shadows form, and it starts adding this dimensionality that wasn't there in the flat image or the flat colors that we initially had. you get a base idea of the shadow, like the basic shadows, the basic highlights, you can go into a whole new level of depth by adding in more colors and new layers of shadow. So I'm adding in darker coloration to them. Not so much on the face, because the face isn't receiving that much shadows. A little bit from the leaf on top of his head, and just a little bit near the sides and edges. Just add a little more form to his figure. But then his legs, his body, it has those gigantic leaves just splayed over top, and that's what's starting to cast shadows over him. The light's not reaching as far. It's starting to get covered in shadow, and so it's starting to darken up, and you have those nice multitude of colors coming into play. And another thing I noticed with the illustrations of Venusaur is that his leaves have a little bit of a bluish tinge to them. Like just a hint of blue. And then the shadows that encase them. So I'm just adding in some of that blue, the multitude of blue into the leaves. And then just fading it out a little bit, just so it has that hint. And that hint, like hints of color like that, really add this whole new depth to the picture. And it starts creating these interesting colors that didn't exist before. It wasn't just solid, it's no longer solid green. It has these little dabbles of blue that shine through and come out. And then, of course, we illustrated in the shadows on the leaves from the flower. And then now we're, of course, putting some cast shadows onto the trunk from the flower and all that. Because, of course, it's getting encased in shadow too. Lots of shadows at play in this one. Which is fun, because it, again, lends to the form. Makes him really come alive on the page. Instead of just being a flat figure. Now I'm just adding some finishing touches, adding that hint of blue to the flower petals now, and a hint of blue elsewhere. I'm hoping to draw out in the mouth and the ears. I'm hoping to draw out a bit of purple, so that'll make some nice shadows going on there with the purple. And of course, you have that tiny touch of blue in the petals. So I think he's finished now, so that's Venusaur. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Bye.